What happens when a controlling neighbor demands that a house built by a veteran's father be demolished? She had no idea who her neighbor really was, and what happened next left the entire neighborhood speechless. You ever had one of those mornings where everything felt just right? The kind where the sunlight's hidden, the porch just so, your knees ain't poppin' too loud when you stand, and that first sip of coffee hits your chest like warm forgiveness? Yeah, that was my Tuesday. I had just pulled a fresh batch of cinnamon raisin rolls out the oven, recipe passed down from my Aunt Loretta, God rest her soul, and I set 'em out on a little folding table near the sidewalk. I do that every other week for folks walking by. No signs, no prices, just take one. Some things in life don't need explanations. Now don't go thinking I'm one of those retired uncles who ain't got nothing better to do. I've had plenty to do in my time. I just prefer peace these days. Bought this house cash, my daddy's house, same one he built with his own 2 hands back when folks had to dig for respect in this country. I came back after 30 years to fix it up proper and mind my business. And boy, that's where the trouble started. That morning, a little boy, maybe 7, 8 years old, came walking up with them nervous shoulders like he expected to be turned away. Shirt too big, knees ashy, but eyes kind. He looked at my rolls like they were the gates of heaven. You can take one, I said, giving him a nod. Ain't gonna bite you. He hesitated, then grabbed one like I was gonna change my mind. Took one bite and his whole face lit up like Christmas in July. Mister, he said, wiping crumbs off his mouth. My grandma used to make these. Then your grandma had good taste, I said, and he smiled wide like I just handed him the moon. Now here's where things got sticky. Not 2 minutes after that boy ran off down the block, I heard that voice. You know the one. That voice that always sounds like it's been waiting all week to ruin your day. Oh no. No. We're not doing this. I turned slowly, already knowing what I was about to see. There she was. Karen Westbridge. 5'4" of self-declared suburban law and order. Blonde bob sharp enough to slice bread, sunglasses that cost more than my mortgage, and a clipboard like it gave her federal authority. She wore that smug grin like it was designer, the kind that says, I run this street even though no one asked her to. She stepped onto my grass like she was stomping on enemy territory. You can't just set up shop like that, she snapped, pointing at the tray. There are codes, zoning regulations, food safety protocols. I blinked. You worried I'm violating the Snack Act of 2023, Karen? She didn't laugh. Karen don't do jokes. I'm serious, she barked, squinting at me like I was some kind of stray dog. This is not a food truck zone. This is a residential neighborhood. We have standards. And I'm one of them, I said, smiling just enough to make her twitch. You see, Karen didn't just dislike my cinnamon rolls. She disliked me. Or rather, what I represented, a grown black man with no mortgage, no noise complaints, no HOA violations, and too much peace for her to stomach. The fact that I kept my yard neat, my house painted, and my front porch clean just seemed to aggravate her more. It's like she needed me to be a problem, and when I wasn't, she started inventing ones. That's when she pulled out the big guns. I've already submitted a report to the HOA, she said, flipping through her clipboard like it was the Book of Judgment. Your house doesn't match the approved color palette. And the front porch, that style is over a decade out of code. Frankly, this whole structure is out of alignment with community guidelines. It may be subject to demolition. Demolition? I just stared at her, blinking slow. Not mad. Not surprised. Just tired. You trying to tear down my home 'cause I gave a kid a cinnamon roll? No, she snapped. I'm trying to protect property values. This neighborhood was fine before you started treating it like your personal flea market. I crossed my arms real slow. Let me get this straight. You think my porch is a threat, but you've been running around with that plastic flamingo in your yard since June. That flamingo is decorative art. It's curated. I nearly choked. Lady, it's got a beach ball glued to its neck. By noon, she'd emailed the HOA, the city, and I kid you not, the local gardening club. I got 3 notices taped to my door in 24 hours. One said my shutters were non-conforming. Another claimed my garden hose posed a tripping hazard. The third, and I read this twice to be sure, said I had excessive foliage of an ambiguous origin. Translation? My tomato plant looked too ethnic. I sat on my porch sipping iced tea while Karen marched up and down the block like she was training for a homeowner's Olympics. But the worst part wasn't the complaints. It was the silence from the folks I'd shared those cinnamon rolls with. The same people who used to wave every morning suddenly got real interested in their shoes. One woman crossed the street to avoid saying hi. It's funny how quick people forget kindness when fear walks in the room wearing pearls and a clipboard. I ain't gonna lie, it hurt. Not because I needed their validation, but because I thought maybe, just maybe, I found a pocket of the world that didn't expect me to shrink. That night, I walked through my house room by room. Touched every doorknob, every shelf, every picture frame. This place wasn't just mine, it was me. My father's sweat lived in these walls. My mother's prayers echoed in the floorboards. My whole life had roots in this soil. And now some woman with a yard full of fake flamingos and a grudge the size of Texas was trying to dig all that up. All because I didn't fold when she frowned. I sat on the porch, stared at the quiet street, and thought about what it means to belong. Some folks think property lines give them power. But belonging? That's something deeper. And I wasn't about to let it be stolen by someone with a clipboard and a superiority complex. To be continued. What happened next changed everything. You won't want to miss how the story unfolds. Let me tell you something I've learned over the years. When people like Karen feel powerless, they don't reflect, they retaliate. And baby, let me tell you, Karen retaliated like she had a punch card for petty behavior and was 2 complaints away from a free lawn gnome. The day after that ambiguous foliage nonsense, I woke up to something that damn near made me drop my coffee. Somebody, and I'm not naming names, but her initials start with K and end with RN, had taped neon orange markers all around my property line. Front yard, backyard, even around the birdbath. Each marker had a little laminated tag. Non-conforming structure. Vegetation encroachment. Improper window tint. Window tint? Ma'am, it's a curtain. I stood on the porch, robe tied, slippers on, and stared at the ridiculous pop-up crime scene she'd staged like I was being audited by HGTV. That's when my neighbor Paul, who used to borrow my tools every other Sunday, came waddling up the sidewalk holding a clipboard like it had been surgically attached to his hand. He didn't make eye contact. Jason, he muttered, clearing his throat. We, had a special HOA vote last night. Without me? Well, it was impromptu. Translation, Karen called y'all after her second glass of boxed Chardonnay. He blinked fast. Look, man, the board voted. You're in violation of multiple neighborhood ordinances. Specifically Article 4, Section 9A, Uniformity of Design. I folded my arms. Uniformity? Paul, you've had a 12-foot inflatable Santa on your roof since Easter. That's decorative. It's holding a margarita. He looked away. By the end of that week, I had a formal letter from the HOA citing me for architectural divergence, which is HOA speak for your house has personality and that scares us. It said I had 14 days to comply or they'd seek legal action. 14 days. To change the porch my father built with his own hands. To repaint the shutters my mother chose before she passed. To remove the garden that fed the whole left side of the street last summer. Karen had drawn her line. And I'll admit, part of me wanted to grab a paintbrush, rip down the porch, slap on some beige siding, and just disappear into the neighborhood wallpaper. But then I remembered something. See, I grew up hearing stories about my grandfather, a sharecropper turned union leader who once shut down a whole textile plant just by sitting still. He always said if they come for your home, they already took your name. And I'll be damned if I hand mine over for free. I tried reasoning with the board. I brought photo albums. Building permits. I even made cinnamon rolls for the meeting 'cause I'm still me even when I'm mad. You know how that went? Karen stood up in her pressed khakis and said, Mr. Reeves' emotional attachments while touching cannot override the community's commitment to uniform excellence. Uniform excellence. The room nodded like she'd read scripture. Then she turned to me, lips curled into that tight little grin she saves for passive-aggressive domination. If Mr. Reeves is unwilling to comply, then we must enforce the rules. No exceptions. So I leaned forward, nice and slow, and said, you mean no exceptions now after I moved in? She blinked. Because Paul's Santa wasn't in compliance. Neither was your pergola last year when it was 6 inches too tall. That's different, she snapped. Those were temporary lapses. But my porch is a permanent problem, huh? She didn't answer. But her silence said it all. This wasn't about rules. It was about me. By the following Monday, things got real. I came home from the grocery store and found a city notice stapled to my front fence. A demolition request had been filed with the municipal zoning office. Filed by the HOA. Backed by 3 neighbors. Signed off by Karen. Let me say that again, slow. This woman tried to erase my entire home from the face of the earth over cinnamon rolls and window shutters. I called the city clerk. She sounded apologetic but explained that under a special clause, one Karen clearly dug up from legal purgatory, the HOA had the right to petition for demolition if the structure was deemed a threat to neighborhood character. A threat? I asked. Did my porch rob a bank? Sir, she said, I agree it's ridiculous, but technically it's a clause from 1978. Of course it was. That night, I sat on my porch with a notebook in my lap and rage in my chest. See, I don't get angry easy. Life's taught me that anger burns quick, but dignity burns steady. But this? This was a whole new level of absurd. They weren't just trying to erase a porch. They were trying to rewrite the rules mid-game because they didn't like who walked onto the field. And the worst part? They thought I'd go quietly. That I'd fold under pressure, disappear like I was never here. But what they didn't know, what Karen didn't know, is I don't do quiet when it comes to legacy. The next day, I started making phone calls. Not loud ones. Not dramatic ones. Just calm, calculated conversations with the kind of people Karen didn't know I knew. That same evening, I called a friend who used to work for the state archives. Told her about the demolition request. She asked for my property number, and 2 hours later she called back, her voice tinged with disbelief. Jason, your house is listed. Listed? On the State Historic Registry. It was added during your father's tenure. You didn't know? I didn't. But I sure do now. I leaned back in my chair, let that sink in, and chuckled low. Well now, wasn't that something? But I didn't make a move yet. Not out of fear. Out of strategy. See, Karen played checkers. But me? I played chess with a timer running. And while she was busy trying to count my shutters, I was already 10 steps ahead, lining up the pieces. This is it. Everything you've waited for, it's coming next. Don't miss how I flipped the whole story on its head. You know that feeling when the whole room's quiet and somebody walks in thinking they own the place, but they the only one who don't know the rules just changed? That was Karen. Only this time, she was walking into my world and I was done playing the neighborly veteran with the soft smile and cinnamon rolls. No apron today. No porch tea. Just facts, patience, and a well-placed silence that says, go ahead, I dare you. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you exactly how the tables turned in real time. The morning after I found out my house was officially listed on the state's historic registry, I brewed a strong pot of coffee and stood at my kitchen window just watching the street. It felt different. Quieter. Like the wind knew something was coming. That's when I saw her, Karen, standing on her lawn in a tailored beige pantsuit like she was campaigning for mayor of make-believe. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, pacing in her driveway and whispering with her mouth tight. She didn't know yet. She didn't know a notice from the State Office of Historic Preservation was already en route to her mailbox, telling her in bold print that the house she tried to erase wasn't just protected, it was untouchable. And I wasn't going to tell her either. No. I wanted her to walk straight into that wall at full speed. By noon, I had a visitor. Deputy City Inspector in a gray Ford. Nice guy. Young. Nervous, like he knew this job wasn't going to be easy. I met him at the gate with a copy of the registry documents already in hand. Mr. Reeves, he said, I just got the file. Honestly, this is above my pay grade. Don't worry, I said, handing him the papers. This ain't about pay grade. It's about paperwork. He whistled low. Karen's not gonna like this. I smiled. She can file that under, not my problem. Now here's the part that got real poetic. Karen had scheduled an HOA neighborhood review walkthrough for that very afternoon, you know, where the board strolls through the block pretending to inspect things while secretly gossiping louder than lawnmowers. They stopped at every mailbox, snapped pictures of every unapproved flower bed, and scolded a teenage girl for having a lavender welcome mat. And then they came to me. Karen stepped forward, her little pack behind her like suburban backup dancers. Well, she said, eyes narrowing as she looked up at my porch. It hasn't been repainted. Nope. And you haven't removed the trellis or the garden path like we instructed. Didn't plan to. One of the board members coughed nervously. Karen, maybe we should, eh? She cut him off with a look. Then turned back to me, smug as ever. Then I'm afraid we'll be proceeding with our request to begin demolition proceedings. You've left us no choice. And that's when I said it. Calm. Clear. Loud enough for her entire entourage to hear. Karen. I hope you made a copy of that demolition paperwork because the state of Georgia just made your whole request invalid. She blinked. What? Yeah. This house. I reached into my file folder and pulled out the official seal. Recognized historical landmark. You tried to demolish a registered property. The silence? Delicious. She grabbed the papers like they might catch fire in her hands. Flipped through every page with shaking fingers, mouth opening and closing like a fish that just got yanked out the tank. But this must be a mistake. Nope, I said, folding my arms. My father built this house. Served 2 tours. Was honored by the governor in '88. And this property, his home, was granted protected status before you even moved into this neighborhood. Her face went pale. Not just pale, ash gray. One of the board members leaned in, whispering, "Karen, if he's right." "He isn't," she hissed. "He forged these. This is manipulation." Actually, came a voice from behind her. "We confirmed everything this morning." It was Inspector Daniels, the city officer from earlier. Stepped out of his Ford like he was announcing the halftime show. "Mr. Reeves' house is a designated historic site. Demolition, alteration, or forced reconstruction is legally prohibited without state clearance. And even if it weren't, your HOA has overstepped its authority by filing that request." He turned to Karen. "You submitted fraudulent documents to a government agency." Karen's jaw dropped. I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head. The HOA crew started stepping away from her, like kids inching away from a classmate caught cheating during a pop quiz. Now I wasn't looking to humiliate anyone, I'm not built like that. But I wasn't about to let her rewrite history either. This wasn't just about me. It was about the fact that folks like Karen think they can make the rules as they go as long as they say it with a clipboard in one hand and a polite smile on their face. But sometimes the truth don't need to shout. It just needs to stand still and let the lies crash into it. She tried to stammer something, a protest, an explanation, a dramatic pivot. "Mr. Reeves, surely we can find a compromise. Maybe just the shutters." I held up a hand. "No, ma'am. You don't get to break something and then ask how to fix it when you're holding the hammer." Then I turned to the rest of the board. "And I don't blame all of you. Some of y'all probably didn't know what she was doing. But from this point forward, anything concerning this house, you take it up with the state. And if I hear one more word about demolishing anything on this land, I'll make sure the next paperwork comes from a court." No one said a word. Just shoes shifting on pavement. A cough. Whined through the trees. "And Karen?" She turned on her heel and stormed off fast, but not before I caught that look in her eyes. That look people get when they realize the person they tried to erase ain't going anywhere. That night, I sat on my porch, cinnamon rolls back on the tray, jazz humming through my speakers. One of the neighbors, Mr. Lattimore, wandered over and took a seat. "You handled that real smooth," he said. "I don't do messy," I told him. He looked around, then leaned in. "I think you reminded everybody who this street really belongs to." I didn't say anything. Just passed him a roll, leaned back in my chair, and let the silence speak for me. This was the turn. But the story ain't done yet. The aftermath is just as powerful, and what comes next will leave no doubt about who really owns the block. The thing about truth is it don't need permission to stand. It just waits, solid as stone, while lies do all the dancing. And when the music stops, guess which one's still standing? That porch I built back up with my own hands? Still here? Karen's clipboard? Gone with the wind. But this ain't about her no more. This is about what happened after she learned who I was. Let me break it down. It took exactly 2 days for Karen to go quiet. No morning patrols. No HOA emails. No anonymous complaints about my improperly cheerful garden. Just quiet. Well, mostly. I did catch her peeking through her blinds once or twice, like I was the boogeyman of suburbia. But she wasn't stomping down sidewalks with printed citations anymore. See, when the state slapped that protected historical site label on my house, the HOA's little game ended. Quick. And when it came out publicly, I might add that she'd submitted a false demolition petition, folks started backing away like she was contagious. Suddenly, she wasn't neighborhood royalty. She was the one who almost cost the community a state grant tied to the registry. Irony? Oh, baby. It was thick enough to butter toast with. That Saturday, the neighborhood had its annual Fall Front Porch Festival, where everyone opens up their yards, serves cider, and tries to pretend they actually talk to their neighbors more than twice a year. I wasn't planning to participate. But around 8 a.m. I stepped out, looked at my porch, freshly sealed wood, flower boxes blooming proud, and thought, why not? So I set up my tray like old times. Cinnamon rolls. Banana bread. A few jars of peach jam I'd canned last month. Nothing fancy, just real. I didn't put up signs. Didn't make announcements. I just waited. And slowly they came. First was little Timmy, the boy who started it all with that one cinnamon roll. He came skipping up the sidewalk with a grin that could power a street lamp. You remember me? He asked, eyes wide. Course I do, I said, handing him a roll. He bit into it like it was holy. Then came Mrs. Alvarez from down the block, the one who hadn't made eye contact with me in weeks. She looked sheepish, hands tucked in her cardigan. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, she murmured. I didn't say much. Just handed her a slice of banana bread and a nod that said we good. Just don't forget again. One by one, folks trickled over. Some came with plates in hand. Others brought lawn chairs and just sat for a while like they'd forgotten what it felt like to be still in good company. Around noon, Mr. Lattimore showed up again, this time with a folding chair and his harmonica. Sat right next to me and said, "Thought I'd bring some music back to this block." Didn't ask. Didn't need to. He played low, sweet notes, the kind that make you remember your mother's kitchen and your grandfather's laugh. The street felt full again. Not just with people, but with presence. The kind of quiet joy Karen never could measure on a spreadsheet. Now here's the kicker. Right in the middle of the afternoon, with my porch surrounded by neighbors eating, laughing, and letting go, who do you think tiptoed onto my walkway? Karen. Hair pulled tight. Eyes twitching. No clipboard. She walked up like the ground wasn't sure whether to hold her or shake her off. People fell silent. Even the harmonica paused mid-note. She cleared her throat. Looked around. Then fixed her eyes on me. "Mr. Reeves," she said, voice tight. "I misjudged you. You could have heard a raindrop hit a rug. I was wrong about your home. About you. And I apologize. Now let me pause right there. Because I know some folks might have expected me to jump down her throat, deliver some grand speech, or turn her away with fire in my eyes. But I didn't. I just looked at her, long and steady, then pointed to the tray. "You hungry?" She hesitated, then nodded. I handed her a roll. Just one. Because sometimes grace don't mean forgetting. It means remembering and still choosing to be whole. Later that evening, when the sun started dipping and the chairs were folding up, a group of neighbors came to me with something unexpected. A framed certificate. Community Appreciation Award, it read. For preserving the heart of the neighborhood. They signed it. All of them. Even Paul, with his inflatable Santa and all. And just like that, the porch became more than wood and nails again. It became a symbol. Of resistance. Of belonging. Of what happens when somebody stands their ground, not with fists, but with roots. The next week, the city put up a small plaque on my fence. Simple, bronze, respectful. It read, "Reeves Family Home, Historic Site. Built by hand. Protected by legacy." Karen still walks by every now and then. She don't speak much. But once, just once, I caught her stopping for a moment, eyes lingering on the plaque like maybe, just maybe, she finally understood what this place meant. Not just to me, but to the story of this street. Let me leave you with this. Legacy ain't in the fancy lawn or the perfectly matched shutters. It's in what you stand for when nobody claps. It's in the quiet decisions to stay kind, stay rooted, and stay present even when they try to make you feel like a stranger on your own porch. So next time somebody tells you your presence doesn't fit their vision, remind them. You weren't built to blend in. You were built to last. And as for this porch, ain't going nowhere. Neither am I.